Nation.
Welcome to the Sunday Symposium. We're Still Here, presented by Native Roots Radio Network. This is a Native conversation of where we've been and where we're going.
Welcome everybody to the Sunday Night Native Symposium brought to you by Native Roots Radio. If you like this broadcast and would like to see more, make sure you stop into our Patreon at patreon.com/Native Roots Radio Network and donate whatever you can. Miigwech.
Ho-chunk Graja, Wakunja Hade, Hingadena. I just want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. And I really, especially the vets that are here tonight, it's just an awesome thing during Native American Heritage Month. I talked to Heather Keeler, who's our new House representative up in Moorhead, and we said, why don't we do a show on vets? So I said, I do what all the women tell me to do, so to keep things going in a good way. So I listened to Heather, and here we are tonight with some great vets. And Heather, great idea. You have a few words, and maybe you can introduce our first vet.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming. I think for me, when Robert and I were talking about what some topics we could have, because for many months we were talking about the campaigns and candidates, and we really want to be able to utilize this space for good year round. And so I said, well, it makes sense to me with the Marines celebrating their birthday on Monday and Veterans Day this week, that we really have to take the time to respect and honor our veterans. I myself have not served, but I come from a family of many generations. I tell the story often that people in my family were serving in the military before we were actually considered U.S. citizens. And so that in itself just shows our loyalty and love for this land and our people. And so my dad served in Vietnam. He utilized the VA, so I saw those services in combination with the IHS. My brother retired Marines all the way down to my nephews in the Marines now. And so I have a whole lot of respect for our service members. So thank you to all Pilame who's on this call, but also to everybody who's out there, and also to the family members. I think we often say thank you to the individuals who are serving, but we have spouses, we have kids, we have siblings who are a part of that whole system, the system of support to make sure that our service members are taken care of, that they have their care packages, and that their families are taken care of while they're serving our country. And so I just really wanted to say in this space, Pilamae, thank you for all the things that you've done, and for all of the family members out there. I want to start, one of the things I love about this, we're very virtual, we've been very virtual, and I think I would have the opportunity to meet so many people in person. And so I really appreciate Native Roots Radio for providing this symposium every Sunday night, because I get to meet amazing people from across the state, across the region, and really across the nation. And so tonight, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Sandy for the first time. And so I'm really excited to hear more about her and the amazing work that she's done, and how she's stepped up and really served this country and our communities. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sandy. Thank you so much for being here. You want to tell us a little bit about your awesomeness, and we'll go from there.
Well, then that's a really short show of my awesomeness. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Sandy Whitehawk, and I'm from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And I was adopted out and raised primarily in Wisconsin, and by a white couple. And that placement was a really difficult placement. And I ironically grew up about 35 miles from the Ho-Chunk people. But because my missionary Christian family didn't know anything about Indians and didn't know that there were 11 reservations in Wisconsin, I never made a connection. I didn't know they were there. So anyway, part of the work that I do today is around helping communities heal and address the impact of that separation of our families, the near destruction of our families through adoption and foster care. But since this is a veteran show, I'll start with my 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 military experience, which is very little actually, but what influenced me so much were the veterans, those that had gone, other military folks. But in 1974, one day I was sitting around my house and I went, I should just go check out the recruitment office. Because even though it was right around the middle end of the Vietnam War, I always, even though I was part of that culture group at that time of being against the war for what that war was doing to communities and everything, I still had this thing that I still can't explain to you, but what prompted me and pulled me to go down and ask about what it would be like to be in the service. So on a sunny day in the summer, I went down and said, I'm interested in enlisting. And it was kind of funny because they put me through a barrage of tests right there, and a big long test. And when I got done with it, the guy went over correcting it, and he comes back out of this room after going over it, and he says, well, young lady, I wouldn't want you to touch my car if there was anything wrong with it, which means I had done very poorly on the mechanical part of the test. He said, but I would never get into an argument with you. So I'm going to suggest that you go into the Navy and you go into communications. And I thought, okay, whatever that meant. I'm 19 years old. I don't even know what that means, go into communications. So I get a date and I go in, and like a lot of other people who had a really hard background and maybe even poor background, but where things were not stable and you experienced violence and stuff. Boot camp was a challenge. Yeah, they yelled at you, and just like you see on TV, but they couldn't hit you. Well, at least in the women's side of Navy boot camp. Because I remember them trying to, get up in my face. They'd yell at me and tell me what I was doing wrong, and other women in tears because they had not ever been challenged like that. And I just remember in my head thinking, this is it? You're not gonna, okay. And I just thought, okay, yeah, we'll get over it and I'll fix it. And it just never bothered me. But what was frustrating was because of my background, I had a little bit of an edge to me, a little bit. I'd become a bully, kind of, sort of, because I had been so bullied being the only Indian girl in the town I grew up in and stuff. And so that was, I do think to myself, I was really rough on some girls that couldn't keep up, because if they couldn't keep up, everybody paid the price for one person's mess up. And so they didn't have a towel fold perfectly or their bed made right. Everything got trashed and we had to do it all over. Things would get thrown out on the sand and people had to crawl through prickly things. I mean, it's just on and on like that. So it really, boot camp really pressures you to create that cohesive unit. And sometimes we would do it kindly and sometimes we would just, anyway, the memories. But then I went on to A school after that graduation and learned, this is really old because this was before computers. So I was on teletype, and they were just starting with those data cards that had the holes in them. So my job was just working in the communications every day. I was stationed in Puerto Rico, and the females got harassed. I was fortunate and not sexually harassed, but I was harassed for job performance. And I remember that I showed up at my duty station first day I was there, and I don't right now, but I always had long nails painted. And since I wasn't in boot camp and I could have nails, and I remember they got me in there and they said, sit down, show us what you can do on the type. And I know they wanted me to mess up, and I'm a pretty good fast typer. And so, and I remember one of the guys looking at my nails, and they were for sure they were going to be able to harass me. So I said, okay, what do you want me to type? And they handed it to me, and I did my thing. And so they couldn't get me for that. So every day for about the first while I was there, they were trying to trip me up doing something, and like telling me to go into the storage unit and find asshole covers. And I went into the storage unit and I'm like, asshole covers. And it's those things that you put on papers, that to save the paper from being ripped out of the ring binder. I figured it out. So I came back and I said, here's your asshole covers, sir. But it was just constant until I finally stood up to the dude that was doing it. And I just told him, knock it the fuck off, that, he wasn't going to do that to me anymore. And everybody was in shock because no, lower rank tells, you're chief of the day. I did it anyway. I cannot believe I did not get court-martialed. But maybe they just thought the spunk I had was good. I don't know. But yeah, in fact, I'm leaving out what I really said because this is, but it was not, it was awful, but not awful, but very colorful what I actually said to him. So I don't know that women experience that today. In some cases, I think men were very resentful. In other cases, I think they thought, okay, cool, and so when I got out of the service, I only served 2 years. But what I learned there was organization, do things, get it done. I don't know, I learned things I did not learn in my home or in school. And I know I carry those with me yet today. I know people tell me I'm bossy. I know part of it's because I'm Lakota, but the other part is because that's what you did in the service. It's like, hey, can you do this? Can you move this? And it's like, we ain't got time to talk about it. Just move it. And so I think I picked up some of that. When it wasn't until I was able to find my family in Rosebud and then find the Indian community in Wisconsin that I came into understanding the role of a veteran in the Indian community. I was really shy about wanting to go out for the victory dance and everything because I had not been in combat. I had not done anything huge in the service. But the men who were in the Oneida Nation Color Guard would always encourage the women and say, you took the same oath as everybody else. And I remember conversations in my job in Puerto Rico, they talked about that, and they said, just because you're not on the front lines, don't forget the first place they're going to knock out if there's a war is communications. So, and that's us. So we all have, every single person has a specific job that contributes to the whole. And so anyway, they really encouraged, who was it again? Dan King from Oneida. He and Jesse Torres were made it their job to encourage women to be in the color guard. So I believe that color guard was the first color guard to include women veterans. And when we were very first part of that, when the victory dance was over, sometimes certain men would not want to shake our hands. And I remember as the women, we stood over to the side and we didn't get mad or resentful. We understood their sense of, they had to process this because this was theirs. This was something that was finally theirs after all these years of being emasculated through all the years of boarding school and their loss of role in our communities. So we knew, and we were very careful and just kept smiling and kept being, part of that, part of the color guard. A couple of years into that color guard process, I was asked to carry the Wisconsin Indian Veterans Association Eagle staff for a year. So I was the first woman non-combat veteran to carry a Veterans Eagle staff, which again scared the crap out of me because of what I just said. Non-combat female. But what I learned through that process was it brought out other women veterans and found out there were all these World War II women veterans at this one powwow, because I carried that staff in, and then these women called me over and they go, "We're so glad to see you out there. We were in the Army, what years?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." So all these men were out here, but here again were women, my grandma's age, veterans, and not having any recognition. So I told the person I was getting interviewed that day for Indian Country Today. And I said, "I won't do the interview unless you interview those elders first and get their stories, and then I'll do my interview." So they did. And they were Ho-Chunk women. It was pretty cool. I was happy about that. So do I have time to tell one more story?
The floor is yours.
Sandy could tell stories all night long.
Veterans have served in so many capacities. All you really have to do is call a commander or someone that you know is in a color guard and say, "We need help with something." And they'll gather the men and the women that are part of that guard or that unit and help in any way that they can. So my years of powwowing in Wisconsin, primarily being part of those, being part of that community was very healing for me in many ways. And Barry, when you said you were raised by Vietnam veterans, and that was really special, I know exactly what you mean, because the years I spent with them, traveling with them to Canada and the places that we traveled as a color guard. The reason that we got to travel is we would get asked to do these 3 veteran dances. One was the KIA dance, Killed in Action. The one was Wounded in Action. And the other one's the snake dance. And the snake dance is done at a lot of powwows. And it's just a snake-like type dance of a veteran song. And there might be some narration around it to speak to the sacrifice veterans have contributed. The KIA dance is really powerful, very healing. There's a man that we had identified as the person who would walk point. This was an acting out being in combat. So there would be someone has to walk point. So, and then there's a narrator, and then a drum singing a veteran song along the way. So he's out walking point, looking around, and the narrator is saying, he has an important job tonight. The safety of his platoon depends on him to see any impending danger. And they go on like that as he's going around the arena. And then they say, but there's times that he's out there when maybe he's looking into the sky. Maybe he's just something reminded him of everybody back home. And he's thinking of his mother and father, his wife, maybe his family. And he's thinking that he's wants to make them proud, and he wants to do this for them. And then all of a sudden we hear a shot, and he goes down. And 3 women that are part of the color guard, I was one of them, we would run out to him, take his bayonet, his gun, put it in the ground, put his helmet on top, and we would roll him onto this army blanket, roll him into it, dance around it, and then pick him up and take him up front to the MC stand. And this was to show that we represented the spirits that are always with you, taking care of you. And we take them up to the MC stand. And then the narrator is saying, it's true, he gave his life during this important job that he had this evening. And he left thinking of you. He left being glad that he was able to do this for you. And us three women dance around him 3 times or 4 times, and then he pops up and puts his helmet on, cocks it back, pulls open his jacket, and carries his gun out loose in front of him. And he just starts dancing, and the drum beat goes really fast. And he just is fervently dancing, and the MC guy is, and then we're leading him, like with our fans going like this, because he's now making his journey to the spirit world. And the people that are watching this are crying, and it's hard and healing all at once. The narrator is saying, I know this is hard for you. I know that you want your relative back with you in your home. We know that this pain never goes away. But look at him. Look how happy he is. This is what he really is on the other side. And he's just dancing all happy. And we know this is hard. And then have a closing. And what the color guard would do is offer, people could come up and talk to them, family members, other veterans, other combat veterans. And it became a way of counseling, but it's just between veterans, veteran to veteran, which is always, I think, always the best. And I couldn't believe I got to be part of that. To watch that and experience that was just an amazing time. And so the Wounded in Action is very similar, except that he gets carried off the arena, and a different narration about his wounded. When he comes home, he's going to have memories of how he was wounded and how to take care of him, things like that. And then so that we went quite a few places performing those dances for the people. And during that whole time, one of the things I really learned was that silence around pain is healing. You don't have to explain what happened to you in detail like counselors want you to. It would just be a comment like this one veteran, because we were on our way to New York, and they'd been to New York before, to Salamanca, and we're in this one area. He goes, guys, this is the spot I always remember. Doesn't this look like it's going to be helicopters coming over here? They all look out, and then there would just be silence. And then after a period of time in that silence, they'd start talking again. And I knew that within that time, they were thinking of things, maybe not so traumatic, but maybe they were thinking of something but they had that camaraderie of other veterans there. And that's the part that I believe is so very healing. And those veterans would really take care of each other. If anyone started drinking, if anyone started having a hard time, they just would flock to them and help them and take care of them. So I witnessed that. So my time as in the color guard was just amazing. And I'm just so grateful to Dan King and Jesse Torres, Jan Malcolm. I can't remember the other names, are leaving me now because my brain's going fuzzy, but the women were amazing. Oh, one other thing that happened. You know how at a powwow when a feather drops, they have 4 veterans come out, dance around, pick up that feather. And I remember one time Jan Malcolm, she's an Army veteran, Oneida Army veteran. There's at the Menominee powwow, I think, and she goes, Sandy, they're going to pick up that feather. Let's watch. And I just remember thinking, we see this all the time. What's the big deal? And she goes, no, we got to watch this, because what if there weren't any men around? What if something happens and there's not 4 veterans? We would have to go out there. And I said, yeah, but we're not combat veterans. She goes, it doesn't matter. We're a veteran. We would have to go out there. We would be the next in line. So let's watch. So I watched with her. And lo and behold, at our gathering for our children and returning adoptees powwow that We host every year here in Minneapolis. One year a feather goes down and they call for veterans. 3 of them pop up. And I don't know where the color guard was. They must have been out smoking. And I said, go get the color guard. Maybe they were down the street at the dollar store. I don't know. All I know is that there was no 4th veteran. And I waited and I waited and I waited. So I finally came up and I said, well, I'm a veteran. I can do that. And so I did. And it still was uncomfortable, but it was still an honor to step in and to do that. And so after I did that, I did go up and tell the people, that I'm not a combat veteran, but that I was taught by other veterans that this is our role, if we step in when it has to be done. So I think that's about all I can think of, other than there's one of the things I'd like us to see as we continue to honor veterans is finding our World War II women veterans. There's a 100-year-old woman in Cheyenne River. I just thought about her like an hour ago. I wish I would have had the presence of mind, but Marcella LeBeau, she was on the beach at Normandy mending up the guys. And she's been honored and stuff, but when we don't bring out our women the way we could. Oh, I was gonna one last thing. I'm really happy to see like the Lakota Women's Color Guard and the other women that are stepping forward in the Color Guard. And this was just in the mid-90s when we were first stepping out as taking that position, taking that place. And it wasn't as easy, a lot of men accept it today, but I'm really honored that I was seen as one of the people who could be part of that with the Oneida Nation Color Guard, because they really are the ones who were the first to do that, and they're in Wisconsin. So I think that's all I got to say.
Well, I really, really appreciate you being on, and I know you just been home from the hospital, and this is a huge, huge thing. But there's many ways we want to honor you, and this is one specific way tonight. Sandy, thank you so much, and I know you need to get going, and rest up so you can get back into the fight. But I really, really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thank you. And if anybody had any questions, I'd be happy to answer a question.
Oh, okay.
If there was any. Well, good. That means everybody is satisfied.
And if I could just say a big thank you, Sandy is also a warrior for our families and our Native American children. She works with the ICWA law firm here in Minneapolis and is always championing reunification and continued support for our families. So thank you for not only being a warrior for our nation, but also for our people, even to this day, Sandy.
Thank you.
Awesome. I want to now head it over to Barry, but before I head it to Barry, because Barry's going to introduce our guest, I'm really pleased to have Barry with us tonight. Barry has his own story, and I know he's shy about speaking about his own stuff. So we'll talk about that a little later. But you're a true warrior, Barry, and everything. When I need to know something Indian, I call Barry. So Barry's going to introduce our next guest, and we're going to add Alan Roy on here too. And Barry, I'm going to give you the floor right now.
Thank you very much, Robert. When I heard that this individual that I'm going to be introducing was one of the guests tonight, I want to let folks know before I introduce this man, like I was telling earlier, being raised by Vietnam vets and lot of Korea and World War II in my childhood, you learn to respect certain attributes. And this man I've known of for many years, and he has a reputation that precedes him, a reputation of humility and feeding people. He's recognized as a leader amongst his nation, of the Ho-Chunk Nation, as a clan leadership. And through all those things, being a Ho-Chunk fluent speaker and being clan leadership and feeding people, which is one of the most important things to do as a leader in our community. He also served his country valiantly during the Vietnam era. And so with that, I want to introduce Sergeant Boy Ladd. He was part of the Charlie's Rangers 75th Airborne Ranger Division. In Vietnam, 1971, he received wounds and was decorated for valor. He served in 36 combat missions with 32 firefights under his belt. Team leader of teams 22 and 24. Acting first sergeant last 6 months of his tour in Vietnam. He's also an inducted, recognized member of the Red Feather Society of the Lakota and Dakota people. To be a member of the Red Feather Society, you have to receive at least 3 wounds in combat and be wounded. And when you are recognized as a member of the Red Feather Society, tribal councils and traditional councils all must approve, and only the Red Feather Society members can induct you. He's a member of the National Vietnam Veterans Board from 1988 until 1991, and was outstanding Vietnam Veteran of the Year 1991, 94, 95, and 2003. And so I humbly introduce you, Mr. Boy Ladd, a leadership and a role model for our young people to look up to today.
Aho, egi honk washu shedere, egi manape, egi hirushka hinachin, egi karagiwe, egi wong shigrajra, egi ikshaguga ingaire, egi maichete hirajra, egi boy ladga, egi hirasta, egi sirachje, egi 1971, egi de jungache, egi wakiri, deske, egi hamte, egi wodagnagre, egi wodere, shide. I want to first of all say I want to thank all your host and Vince Bile. I guess he's the one that called me earlier and suggested I get on the air tonight. And do want to welcome everyone in the listening audience. I'm speaking all the way from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I come from the Ho-Chunk Nation, who long ago were a warrior people. You know, through treaties, they've always tried to make us farmers. They relocated us about 8 or 9 times, but we've always tried to return back to our homeland, back to Wisconsin. And thus today you see 2 bands of the Winnebago and the Ho-Chunk Nation, one down in Nebraska and the other in Wisconsin. We practice a way of life, you know, as I said, a traditional way of life where we revere our veterans, our warriors. Our religion, our first religion was that of the war bundle, the medicine bundle, feast lodge religion. And thus later we adopted the Madewan from the Ojibwe and also the Menominee people. And from that, you know, we've always revered our veterans in a very respectful way, through ceremony, through honor, song, and dance. You know, the sacrifices that we made in Vietnam, you know, is something that we think about throughout our lifetime. I was very fortunate being raised by my uncles, my grandparents, living in a wigwam, you know, living way out in a bush, so to speak, and being raised in a traditional way. And listening to the stories within our lodge, I listened to my uncles and their bravery. We look at our bundles, our war bundle, our medicine bundles. It's made up, comprised of many of the war trophies that we had attained from many of the battles, be it World War I, World War II, even some of the wars back in 1812, 1800s. My bundle, for example, goes back 400 years ago. So there are literally many, many stories, hundreds of stories. And to be knowledgeable and to understand that is a kind of a way of life. It's honor and respect, tradition. We instilled and preserved that tradition through our exploits, our things that we had seen in battle. As the lady was speaking about earlier, we look at tradition and we look at the roles and responsibilities of our warriors. For myself, I've been fortunate because I not only used my experience, it has opened many doors for me, has taken me throughout the world and wearing many different hats, official capacities, and speaking behalf of my people, especially that of the traditional people. And so today, as a Herushka man, as a Pawa man, I share a lot of my stories and a lot of the traditions that I've obtained and learned through our way of life. The things I speak about, I'm sure many people have heard me at many different powwows, many conferences, been invited many times to be a keynote speaker, and the lessons that are learned, the stories I share are lessons that I learned in combat, in battle. Thus, it's utilized for our children, our women relatives, for them to learn from that. Right to us as Native people, as especially Ho-Changada people, the right is perhaps the most misunderstood word today among our people. A right to lead our people, the right to sing, the right to feather our people, the right to name our children is something that was attained in battle long ago. I believe that all tribes and all nations across the country had that same belief, similar belief. I've always said that, at one time we were all one nation. Basically, isolation, distance, and time has created a difference in languages. In my travels throughout North America, be it Mexico, United States, Canada, there's a certain similarity in a lot of the languages. I know among the Ho-Changada people, we speak a Siouan dialect related to the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota. I like to consider us the fourth element. We say Dakota, LDH, and have professed that to our lodge and to a lot of our elders back home where I come from. But again, a lot of that comes from the teaching that I've learned in our lodge, both the Madewan and the Feast Lodge. Our Feast Lodge, we hold feast 4 times a year, our ceremonies. And during that process, we feed the spirits of our enemy. For many of us, when we go into battle, when you take coup, out of respect to our women and our children, I dare not use the word kill. We usually say we take coup on the enemy. And from that coup, that enables and gives us the right to, again, name our children, the right to pass on those feathers. Feathers we do not take lightly. Any feather worn by our men and our women relatives, our children, or attained in battle is something that we do not play with. And just because so and so wears a feather a certain way, that doesn't give you the right. A right, like I said, is obtained by our veterans and our warriors. So we do not play with that, especially in the world of Herushka. Herushka, another word to the Ho-Changada people, is it talks about powwow, like Wichipi among the Lakota, Dakota people. Herushka is a Ho-Chunk word that's been recognized even as far south as Oklahoma. Many of the different tribes across the country use that term, which basically means to fight, to go to war. I've loosely used that in terms many times in some of my speeches, workshops, and trying to teach a better understanding. It isn't so much what we say, the gore or taking a human life, as it is the honor, the respect. When we think about what we had learned in battle, we bring those war trophies home. We bring those, we put them into our bundles. And from that, rights are attained. We name our children. Names when we give to our people. I've had to name even some other combat veterans more recently in the last few years. And one, we say that among the Ho-Changada people, our Indian names were given. It was the spirit of something that we had learned in battle. I still use that same formula today. The teachings, the things that I express and speak about were not something that I made up. It's something that's been passed down through the centuries. We do not interpret our religion. We do not interpret our society, our ceremonies. We, again, obtain or we learn from our teachers before us. I'm very honored, very humbled by two of our Medal of Honor winners among the Ho-Changada people. We look to Red Cloud and the purpose of what he had served what he had done for our people, not just the Ho-Changara, but all Native people. I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I'm very honored when I saw the firing range where it said Red Cloud Range. I said, that's one of my uncles. That man took care of me. He got his Medal of Honor in Korean conflict, and very honored. I thought about that in a good way. I was very fortunate, and because of my athletic ability, I guess, so to speak, before I went in the military, I wrestled in college. I made the Olympic team back in 1968, and but I couldn't go because I had an opportunity to go to Russia. That's before Vietnam, before I had the opportunity to enlist. After going to Russia, I came home, and I didn't like what I saw. And eventually I walked in front of the recruiter's office 3 times, and finally I walked in, and I've always read about the Green Beret, the Special Forces, and finally the third time I walked in front of the recruiter, he came out and he said, well, Chief, are you going to come in? I said, well, I guess. And lo and behold, I signed up. What do you want to go into? I said, I want to go into Special Forces. So I signed up, and after going through basic AIT, all the various branches, the military academy, and then Rangers, I ended up first sergeant in every school I went to because of my size and playing football and being a wrestler. And so I was kind of honored being a first sergeant through all training, military academy, Rangers. I trained with RAF, Marines, SEALs, you name it. There were a number of different branches worldwide that came to the academy, and I trained with them. I was their first sergeant. So by the time I got to Vietnam, I was very fortunate and being able to serve with Charlie Company. I served with perhaps one of the most decorated units in all of Vietnam and one of the most distinguished warriors. Any combat veteran that's been to Vietnam has recognized or heard the name Dutch Sorrell. Dutch was my team leader. And there were songs that were composed in his honor. And for me, it seems like what they call a synchronicity, something inevitable that I would meet this man, let alone become a part of his team. And so I was fortunate in going over to Vietnam. It isn't to many of us as Indian veterans, warriors, a time that we believed in a war, as it is a time to earn our rights. We exercise these rights in our ceremonies at home, and oftentimes say, if you cannot speak in your own lodge back home, you shouldn't be speaking out here. So I respect that very carefully, and I choose my words rather carefully that I may not offend the spirits before me. As I've done many workshops around the country, they've always had, upon the completion, 1 or 2 people coming to me crying, asking for help, and take me with you. And I wished I could, I wished I could, and it's heartening, especially when I sat on a Vietnam Veterans Board. I spoke at many hospitals, VA hospitals around the country, and many societies, and it always hurt to see some of those that could not walk anymore and lost a limb in battle. And but some of their veterans, when they come home for war, some of them were distinguished veterans. They took many enemy in combat. When they came home, they forgot one of the most important things in life. Just like Hirushka, just like Pawa, we feed, we take care of the enemy. So when we come home, we put on our feast. We always think of the enemy. We feed the spirit of our enemy. Before we went to Vietnam, I think every traditional society, warrior society, we're given a certain protection. Upon our completion, when we come back, we put that back into our medicine bundles. We also appease it by attaching, giving something back. To my people, we still are what we call the takers of the scalp. That's perhaps the highest, the most sacred among our people. Doesn't mean the whole scalp is taken, but a piece of the hair. And we still practice that. We still have our dog feast. We still have our scalp dances. They're very sacred, and only certain people are allowed to participate, to dance. As the young lady was speaking about women participation, that's the time our women, we put them on a pedestal, would dance with our scalps. Women normally in the past were never allowed to speak, were never allowed to come out into the center of the arena. They would dance out in the outer perimeter and support. Later on today, we have a lot of women veterans that have gone out and served our country. As an MC at a lot of the powwows around the country, I'm also, again, choose my words rather carefully, and do recognize their sacrifice, what they have done for our people. In warrior societies around the country, we have to be very careful, but again, learn what a right is. As she was saying about picking up a feather, I've done that literally hundreds of times. When someone picks up an eagle feather, we usually depend on our Purple Heart, our wounded warriors are the only ones normally that have that right to retrieve that feather. Anyone else that touches that feather can bring harm. There's grave consequences. And again, I was raised in that particular society and that way of life. As a Herushka man, I started dancing back in 1952 and still dance today. I still get called upon. I've been given tobacco in advance to come to many different powwows and to take care of a lot of the veteran ceremonies. But I humble myself. I always think, they have their own veterans, and if they can't do it, let me teach you, let me help you. And so I always humble myself, step back, and look to the local veterans in a good way. But if they cannot find one, then I will come forward. And when we take a feather, when we retrieve that feather that's on the floor represents a human life, the enemy that was taken in battle. Therefore, the only way you can appease that spirit is a combat veteran that was wounded in battle that will retrieve that feather. But along with that, also, he must tell a story to appease that enemy. That feather, when he picks it up, he will he will say, Dejangajo in my language, which means I crossed the big water. I crossed the big water. I stand before you. I call to attention all the enemy as they stand beside me. And I will bring out one of them is going to stand beside me, one war story. And I will tell an actual combat story. And again, to appease the enemy of that feather. That feather, then I will retreat and give back to the person that dropped it. Many times, some of them will pass it on to me. They will give something back in return. And I go to my home fire, I give to my women relatives. A lot of times as I go around to different powwows or ceremonies, I've always been gifted with things, and I put them in a big bundle. And so when I go home, periodically, all my women relatives, when I come back to the village, will come visit, and I just open the bundle and they hear, I give that to them because they appease, they take care of me. They take care of my pail when I'm gone. I think the traditional people know what I'm saying, and that they take care of my spirit. They take care of me. They bless me. They pray for me. So again, it's also some responsibility. To have knowledge of something is one thing, but to have the right is the most important. The gentleman is talking earlier about Irby and Floyd Han, and I think of all my Lakota brothers. I think of Francis Menard, Sam Rounsham, Pete Plentywood, a lot of the old timers there, way back, the veterans that were brothers of mine. When I got initiated into the Red Feather Society, it was Frank Fooskrow that initiated it, conducted the ceremony, and Orville Looking Horse is the gentleman that tied the feather on me. And there were tears down my eyes. All my relatives that came to that ceremony, they put on a big giveaway, a big special in my honoring. And again, just as we do as Ho-Chungaha people, again, we, as Native people, it isn't, again, not necessary that we believe in that battle as a time that we honor. We think of our veterans, our warriors. When they came back from the war, they would stop at the edge of their village. They would lower their hair, paint their face. They would notch their feathers, color their feathers, and they would come into the center of the village. Songs were composed in their honor. And also, again, that was a time that we passed on these rights, the right to wear those feathers. So again, feathers we do not take lightly. Do not put one on unless you have the right to. Look to your grandfathers, look to your uncles, your warriors, and they will help you and they will guide you. One does not interpret it because you have to be very careful. When speaking before the people, especially at Herushka, at powwow, or in my lodge, if one tells a lie, it can come back on you, your children. You have to be very, very careful. And when you speak as a warrior, and so for myself, I humble myself. And lo and behold, today I used to always think of the people older than myself. And lo and behold, I begin to find a lot of them. this day of COVID-19 and the sicknesses that are hitting our people. I've lost a lot of relatives over the last 6 months, a lot of Powwow family. It's going to be very hard for me once I hope that Powwow opens up sometime soon, that it's changed, certainly has changed the complexion of a lot of my travels as I think of, again, the teachings of my elders, the teaching of the warriors before me. So again, I want to thank all of you for inviting me here to speak tonight. And again, Powwow is more than a profession. It is a way of life for many of us. And again, to all the warriors out there, I want to say aho. To all my combat veteran brothers out there, aho. Thank you. Pinagigi.
Barry, I'm going to go to you. I know one thing too, Heather, you have to take off, so maybe you can have a quick final word about before you have to go. I know you have to leave, but this has been just exciting for me to listen to.
Yeah, I know that I was supposed to be thinking of questions, but as I listened to both of our presenters and speakers and elders today, I just find myself like as a student, just learning. And I just appreciate the continuous opportunity to hear stories, to learn, and then to carry those on. This is really, when we talk about education, this is how we've always learned. And so in a virtual world, I really appreciate this. I appreciate everybody's time. I feel like I'm always going from one meeting to another thing, life is just really crazy and busy, but I'm so glad I had the opportunity to share in this space with all of you. I see Alan jumped on. Thanks for being here, Alan. You are a huge asset to our communities and stuff. And Barry, I look forward to chatting with you more and with your girls and with the next generation and stuff. So Pilame to everybody. We'll be on here having more topics. Tell Robert what you want to talk about because he listens.
Sometimes Pinagigi, Heather, and congratulations, and say hi Juoni to Mary Kunish too.
Mary, I feel like I always say something to Mary, but I should probably continue to do that because Mary's really set the path for me to feel welcomed in the house. It's really crazy how, like, even in the first hour of orientation, I realized how different we are, how our lens of life is very different in the process. And just the way that Mary's been there and has really set a standard within the house. I'm just so lucky to follow in her footsteps. And I look forward to the work that you do in the Senate and that hopefully really push some awesome things through and then, work with Peggy as well and Jamie. So we have a strong team of women, heading to the Capitol and doing this work. And so, Mary, as always, I just appreciate you and value you. Your mentorship and your leadership to me has really hit my heart and my soul in a very special place.
Wow, thank you. That is that's high praise, and I'm just pleased that we are able to bring more of our Native folks into this realm of leadership, state leadership, and local leadership. And Heather, I think you're going to do just a fabulous, fabulous job, and I really do look forward to working with you as well. Thank you.
So Barry, we're gonna. I am just listening to Boy. I was just totally blown away for his knowledge, and I know you speak in a good way too. And a lot of what she said really rings true about how you go in a good way and how you teach your students. Do you have a comment about Boy that's just unbelievable for me to listen to?
Yeah,
Barry.
I want to say, Wopila Chicha Boy. I lost my father, Floyd, about a year ago and 2 months. And to hear you say his name, I want you to know that from our family, we always had the most respect for your family and always had good stories, And so thank you for mentioning my dad. It's been tough. We haven't been able to have his memorial because of the COVID. But the things that, I can't call boy, lad. He's old enough to be my father. I have to call him, we say Dick, she, or our elders, our relation, and And the words that the people who are listening to this, I hope you really listen, because the things that he talked about is very important. It's an extension of who we are from our nations. You know, a lot of times we forget, you know, we're patriotic people, but we're patriotic first and foremost to our where we come from. And you know, whether we're a Ho-Chunk or Lakota or Anishinaabe or Meskwaki or wherever we come from, that is who we are. I know in World War I, the Lakota's nation as a whole, they, along with a lot of our other Indian nations, declared war on the Germans. And we declared war on Nazi Germany. We also declared war on the Japanese. And so when the United States would declare war, we declared war as partners, not subordinates. And so what was explained to me long ago, this was what Mr. Ladd was talking about, Dixie Ladd was talking about is the extension of the warrior society, you know, talking about things with the kettle dances or the scalp dances, or there's all these elements of a modern powwow that have a meaning. And I think that's very important what he said. He said people shouldn't be wearing feathers just to wear them. You know, there you need to earn those rights. You know, for us, well, how I understood our teaching with the Umaha Wachi, our original, what I think they call the Helushka bustle, was owl feathers and hawk feathers. And very rarely did they use eagle feathers. And I came from a powwow family, and I remember being a young man now, and I was fixing some feathers up, and I had three of my uncles at the time, Irby Hand, Joe Brown Eyes, and Scotty Brown Eyes. And I was fixing things up, and even though that bustle had been given to me, a comment was made that said, maybe you should think of the older ways, you know. And I said, well, what do you think, Uncle? He says, well, you know, I don't feel I've earned that right yet to wear an eagle feather. And he volunteered 3 tours in Vietnam. And so when my uncle said that he didn't feel he earned the right, I had to reevaluate what was important. And I think a lot of, now I'm 45, I'm a young grandfather, and I really hope that this was recorded, because what this man said needs to be remembered. And we need to not be afraid of those things, because those are the things that we're going to go back to. I know my time in the service was strange and brief. You know, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and I actually had to get a surgery. I had an injury when I was a little boy. I fell down some stairs, and so I had to have eye muscle surgery to enlist. So I got the eye muscle surgery to enlist because I just assumed after I graduated high school I was going to go into service, because that's what a lot of people did in Pine Ridge. And everyone who I looked up to was a veteran. And I can't even think of one older male relative that was not a veteran. So that's how many. And a week before I left for basic training, my son's mother was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. And that made me a sole surviving parent and permanently disqualified me. I was very, very much humiliated by that, in the sense that I wanted to do my part. And a few years later, you know, 9/11 happened. So I enlisted again. This time I tried in the Navy with the construction battalion, the Seabees, and they took me. So I went to basic training down in Chicago, Illinois, and had a lot of ventures down there, some good times. And I ended up getting picked for dive school because I was a pretty good swimmer. I learned that people who lived on the coasts couldn't pass the swim test, but everyone who lived in the Midwest or the South could swim. And that didn't make any sense to me, because I was like, you live by the ocean, you guys should know how to swim. You know, and why in the hell would you go in the Navy if you don't know how to swim? It's kind of an oxymoron, you know. I mean, it's kind of like being a horse and not having legs, right? So. But so I initially accepted it, and then I went to this. They call it a dive motivator because they wanted to put me in EOD because as a CB, my rate, which was a construction builder, I could go as a explosive ordnance disposal. And I was young, I didn't know anything, and it's finally some crusty master chief. He sat me down. He says, "Where do you think we dive?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, I hope you don't think we're diving in the Bahamas, he said. You ever watch the Discovery Channel? I said, yeah. You ever see the Channel Islands? Yeah, I said, well, all those great white sharks are there. Oh, yeah. He said, that's right off the coast of Coronado where you'll be diving. I said, give me a shovel. So I said, never mind. I'll just hand me a shovel and I'll be a glorified nail pounder. And I worked really hard and made what was called the Air Detachment with Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 25. And we were activated to go to Kabul, Afghanistan. And I made my arrangements. My son, at the time, it was just him and I. He was going to stay with his grandparents. And right before we're getting ready to go to Gulfport, Mississippi to ramp up and get ready to go, I was called into the skipper's office and I was given a general discharge because I was a sole surviving parent. And people who were hurt or injured all the time, they used to call it TMPQ. And then I guess folks like me were discharged. And that was probably one of the lowest points in my life because I had done everything right. I thought I did everything right. And, I started drinking a little bit and getting into fights. And, I had a few Article 15s as to my name, so I was proud of that, I mean, you can't go into service and not get at least one, right? And I was a little proud of that. I got a little mouthy. But that's when I had, learned how to do. I picked up some bad habits, and I think Mr. Ladd, I mean, the veterans know what I'm talking about. And but I stepped back and it was hard on me. It was really hard on me. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to do any of these things. And so my dad and my uncles, and I know some of my other uncles, Art Owen and some others down there from the Prairie Island way. I know you guys all were Kola. So they said, you need to stop doing that now. And so eventually I came back around. And I was always really proud. I never did get to go to special forces or do anything, but I did get to go to field sanitation school. So I learned how to build the best shitters you could build, And field sanitation school has probably served me better in my everyday life. I know exactly how much, how far away the heads got to be, or latrines at Common Army away from the cook shacks, and how deep, and we'd be digging cat holes and the whole 9 yards. And man, I can make you water that is potable. It'll taste like hell, but you can drink it and you won't die. So I learned some really powerful things because I remember my grandpa's. He said to me, when you go into service, and my dads and uncles, they sat me down. They said they're going to teach you some things. And when they teach you these things, these are very valuable skills. You need to bring these back to the people. So if you look at our veterans, whomever they are, whether they were in a combat role, or they're a motor T, or they're a mechanic, or they're a medic, or even if they're supply, and they bring back skills with them that benefit our nations, our various nations, and so time went on for me, and eventually I made peace with my stuff. And sure enough, my son, followed in my footsteps. He enlisted in the Marine Corps, and he ended up becoming security forces, and then was picked as a Marine Raider and part of the Marine Raider Force. So he made special forces. And beyond that initial enlistment, he didn't follow my footsteps. What he did is he made it come full circle and did all those things that I wanted to do. And my son just came home last year after a 5-year active duty enlistment, and he's in one piece. He came home as a sergeant. He got out as a sergeant. I was a E3 a few times, and then down to Article 15, and then I think I was going to be E4, and then I ruined that. But he always teased me. He was a corporal for the longest time, and I said, "Come on, son. I know that's an NCO in the Marine Corps." I said, "Get E5 before." Oh, Dad, I don't need to do that. Oh, Dad. Sure enough, the last year of his enlistment, he made sergeant. So I was really proud of him. And so I was really hesitant to come on here, but hearing Lekshi Boy talk about his experience really brought a lot of memories for me back, because when I was a kid, the Vietnam veterans, especially, they were a different breed. I remember the work that they had to do. All of my uncles suffered from Agent Orange. I had a cousin who was born with a hurt foot because of Agent Orange. Cancer, with all my uncles who served in Vietnam, all had cancer, and it was linked to Agent Orange. And the United States government, they didn't want to take care of our veterans from Vietnam. They left them, they hung them out to dry, and they had to fight. They had to fight for what they deserved. They made a promise to go and do what they were asked to do, but they had to come back and fight to get medical. They had to come back and get the things that they needed for maybe their kids. And that's what I think frustrates me a lot about nowadays, because it seemed like, and I know Dixie Boy could say, it seemed like after Desert Storm, people just moved on, and we always treated our veterans good. Well, that wasn't the case for me as a child, in my formative years. And we didn't watch Jane Fonda movies in our house. Those are things I remember. And so my son now, he gets out, I tell him, you hold on to keep a copy of your medical records. Keep a copy of medical records. And so it seems like when the grandfather there, the president, he borrows, there's a song we sing, we say, talking about Olote, they borrow us for a little while, and we come home. But when we come home, who takes care of us? The traditional people, And so, like they're talking about, they used to paint themselves black for victory. Ite sabie. They used to do that. Ite sabie. And they'd wipe their hands. And the story was told to me, they were never able to come back into the camp until they had ceremonies and off to the side, and once they wiped themselves down, then they were able to come back into the camp. And these are things that we did to keep our minds right, to keep ourselves, because you're doing brave deeds and being superheroes in superhuman times, doing things that meant life or death, especially when it's in a combat scenario. And so I think about these kind of things and the stories that I was told, and moving forward, I'm really blessed that we're in the community that we are in, because even when the United States forgets, we don't, we don't. And you have a lot of non-Indian veterans that find homes amongst Indian people because we don't forget, and we feed people, we take care of people. And so I think those are some of the things that I think of Veterans Day, the ones that have gone on. And now I think, as far as Vietnam era veterans on my side of the family, we have 2 left. Everybody's gone, and so that generation is going. And so now they got the Afghanistan, Iraqi generation coming up behind them. But they're still Lakota, they're still Ho-Chunk, they're still Anishinaabe when they go overseas. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So with that, that's kind of what I wanted to share. Again, I want to thank Dixie Boyd for sharing his stories, hearing those words, because those are important things to remember and hear them from and I mean this with the utmost respect, old timers, because in this world of instant everything, we want to, like you said, everyone wants to be everything all the time. And unless you've been given the rights to do certain things, or, you know, maybe you just settle down. There's nothing wrong with just being one of the Indians. You know, sometimes it's good. You know, you get a bowl of soup, you get some bread, you know, you can do that. All right. Not everybody, you know, and that's how that works. Given that, well, make a little shna. Pilama pilo.
Pinagigi, Barry, thank you so much. I want to touch base with Mary Kunish. We'll get to you again, boy, and then I want to introduce Alan too, who's right now in the service too. So, Mary, if you don't, you have a few statistics that you wanted to bring up, and Mary, you're one of the last.
You know, Barry, thank you so much for sharing your story, and boy, it's just been really heartwarming and so emotional to hear your stories. It just is so incredible to hear it right from you. I just wanted to share some of the information about our American Indian and Alaska Natives. They have served in the armed forces at 5 times the national average, and they have served with distinction in every single major conflict for over 200 years. And when you consider that the population of the United States is approximately 1.4% Native, but the military population is 1.7% Native, and that's not even those that don't disclose their identity. Native people have the highest per capita involvement of any population to serve in the U.S. military. And there's also, we also have a higher concentration of women service members than all the other groups. Nearly 20% of American Indian and Alaska Native service members were women, while 15.6% of all other service members were women. So our folks, our ancestors, our brothers, our sisters are still putting themselves out there and serving our nation at higher numbers than anybody else. Back in let's see, I'm trying to read some information here. There was an organization called the there was Native American women joined the Red Cross, donating their time and money and clothing higher than any other per capita. And so it's really important to remember that while this was our land originally, we are still stepping up to make sure that that we are protected and that we are defending our democracy here in Minnesota. But the sad part of it, and Barry kind of touched on this, is that our veterans system hasn't always taken good care of our Native veterans, and they end up having lower incomes, lower educational attainment than and higher unemployment than other veterans. And you know that there's benefits for health and for home ownership and education, but oftentimes those aren't made available, or Native folks aren't encouraged to take advantage of those benefits. And so it is so important that our veterans look for those kind of benefits. And to this date, 27 American Indians have been awarded the Medal of Honor, and it's the nation's highest honor. And I don't know if any of you have been able to look online, or now that we're in COVID, this didn't get to happen, but the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian put together a Native American Veterans Memorial, and I got to go out there maybe 2 years ago when they did their soft open, and it was supposed to officially be open this Veterans Day 2020, but of course because of the virus that hasn't happened. So it's just really important that we look at how we can memorialize and remember all of those that fought so hard for us. And so with that in mind, I would like to introduce our next guest. Alan Roy. Alan Roy is a veteran and ran for the Senate this last time around. Fortunately, he's not going to join me in the Senate, but I hope that doesn't complete his plans for leadership in our state, because we really do need the kind of people that Alan is to guide us and lead us through the next couple of years. So, Alan, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, maybe share your story, we'd be happy to listen.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I do want to just say Chimigwech to Barry and Boy for your service, and to all our folks at home that are watching as well. I do want to thank you for your service that are veterans, and what people often forget is that I often like to recognize the families of veterans, because they do make deep sacrifices as well, and these folks are often forgot about. A soldier is only as good as those that are around him, and especially their support system. And so you got Army, and well, I'm Army, but you got military spouses and children and moms and dads and uncles and brothers and cousins and whole communities that make deep sacrifices whenever someone decides to join the service, and or whenever they're deployed downrange. My background, as you guys probably have heard, I'm served in the Army. I'm an Army veteran. I'm still in the Army Reserve now. I've been doing it for a number of years. It's one of the better decisions I made in my life. I didn't join the Army until after I graduated college back in 2006, and I went and became an 09 Sierra. I think that's what my MOS was, which is an officer candidate in training. And so I went to officer candidate school, and I got my commission and became an infantry officer. And so I went to Operation Iraqi Freedom and had a platoon that I had over there. And I can tell you this, it's been one of the greatest privileges of my life to be able to stand among men and women that are just making deep sacrifices and in every way better than I am, right? So I like to say that, because it is true. I got to serve with people that are better than me, and these men and women that are just phenomenal folks. And when they come back home, even in the indigenous community, they do make deep impacts, and they make significant impacts for the better. And and every veteran's story is different, right? My story is generally positive. I think that a lot of folks are. Everybody's story is different. Like the Vietnam era, they were definitely treated a lot differently than our Operation Iraqi Freedom era veterans and our Operation Enduring Freedom veterans. I can tell you from my experience, the VA healthcare system has had significant improvements. Certainly, there's a lot of other areas that they need to improve upon, but for the most part, I know that myself, whenever I need care, they're always there. The Fargo VA is where I go, and they've got a good system up here. But there are, thousands of other veterans out there that are not getting the care and services they need, and so we just got to make sure that we're advocating for our community and making sure that those folks are getting taken care of. That being said, I really, I just tremendously honored to be able to be on here with you guys. I think you've told what needs to be said, right? Especially, Boy, you talked about the traditions of service and the spiritual and cultural impacts of being a Native veteran, and you guys said everything that needed to be said. So again, I'm just really humbled to be on here, and Jimmy Gwitch.
Well, Alan, I really appreciate your service, and I'm so glad that you're here tonight, and you really stepped up, and I really appreciate getting to know you over these symposiums. What I'd really like to do, and Mary, thank you for your words. I'd really like to talk to Boy and let him end the show in a good way. I want you to speak your truth as long as you want, Boy, and I want you to end our show in a good way, Dega. And I hope you don't mind me calling you Dega.
Oh, no problem. long as you don't say choker. No.
Oh, I almost did. Ooh.
Well, I wanted to, I guess I missed a couple parts of what I spoke about earlier. Um, at times when families have come to me, talking about their fathers, grandfathers, uncles that walk the streets, and alcohol and drugs and being in and out of prison, and I begin to find out that some of these individuals, were highly decorated in combat, veterans, in some of their daughters or what have you, family relatives. What does it take to bring them home? And like I said earlier, talking about our war bundle, our feast, our medicine bundles, and about feeding the spirit. So when some of these individuals, when you go into combat, you don't know what the enemy's habits are. He might have been an abuser, an alcoholic, drug abuse, whatever. Uh, uh, and so what happens when you take the enemy, you don't know what his habits are, and he becomes a part of you, just like we do in our feather giving, name giving. He's like a monkey on your back. He sits on your, that enemy sits with you for the rest of your life. And so you use them through ceremony. In this process, when you don't feed the spirit, they're going to bother you. They're going to bother you in the sense that they will not let you sleep, and they're going to soon incorporate their habit, be it alcohol, drugs, or some abuse, shape, or form or another. So I always tell people to be very careful. When you go into combat, it's not necessarily that pulling of the trigger, but it's just the beginning, a road, a journey to your future, that you have a responsibility to your people, to taking care of your people. And getting on to that's one I wanted to finish up on. And I hope that some of the veterans out there, some of the relatives that have brothers or uncles, fathers that are walking the street, you think about that feeding of the spirit to bring them home. The other one was I wanted to share kind of when I was talking about Floyd and Irby and the boys. I traveled with Porcupine, and another part of what we call Herushka. I traveled with them back in 1979, and we hit all the powwows out West Dakotas and went out to Washington, over to Montana, and it was a good year for me. And as a powwow man, as a traditionalist, we always say we feed, we take care of the people. I had a good season, winning season that year, and we got to Browning, Montana, and Porcupine was the hit. They were coming up with all the number one songs, and they sure made me dance good. And I always gave to them and honored them in a good way. But after the powwow was done, I went out to say bye to a few of my friends and everything, and then I came back to the camp, and I asked Floyd, what's going on, because they were all sitting in a group in the circle, and he says, we're trying to figure out how to get home. I said, what do you mean get home? He said, we didn't come in. I said, you got to be kidding me. All the songs that you sang and the honorings and all of that? No, we didn't even play it. I said, no, the respect I have, especially as a veteran, and my respect for Porcupine at the time, I just took all my winnings, my purse, and I just laid it on the table. I said, is this enough to get home on? Because, I hung out with George and all the other boys, and I'm going to be broke the following Thursday anyway. Let it go to taking care of Sievert and Jim and Floyd and Jerry, all the boys, and to this day, Jerry, sometimes when he MCs, he'll bring up that story and teaching to the young people about always sharing and giving. As a powwow man, as a champion, we always learn to give to other people. I find it rather disrespectful if I surround, you might win a couple of thousand and take it all home with you. I say, hey, share it, give it to the other people less fortunate. I see some guys and families that this guy shows up at every powwow, but he never wins. Those are the people you take care of because they give you a blessing in return, in a good way. So you always share and you always give to them in that. And in closing, I have a story that I wanted to share. And of course, among many of the warriors, that's part of our responsibility. Leave a lesson learned in life. And a story that is an actual combat story that there's a lesson to be learned, especially for many of you that are fathers that are parents out there, some of these young men, future warriors. Well, again, as a custom, we start out with our stories, our war stories, by saying, De Junga Joe, I crossed that big water. I served with Charlie Rangers. And on my way to Vietnam, I was in Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort McCoy, and I night before everybody was going to ship out to Vietnam, I stayed back, and I didn't have any relatives. My parents are gone, my grandparents is gone, and I wrote a couple of letters out, and I heard someone crying, and I had my own room because I was a ranking NCO, so I went out in the Bay Area, and there was a young man sitting in a corner, and I went over and sat down by him, and he was crying, and I, I talked to him in a good way, like a son, and he told me his life story. And he kept saying, "I'm not going to come back." I said, "Don't say that. I'll take care of you. I'll watch over you." And so I went to Vietnam, got to Vietnam, and that young man, the young man from Parme, Ohio, Francis Scott, he was on my team. And on my fourth mission, I was a assistant team leader, ATL, and Dutch was the team leader at the time. And we got up near the DMZ, and we got on a trail. We jumped in early in the morning, and there was a lot of tracks, elephant tracks, and a lot of enemy movement, but troop movement. And so we came to a fork in the road in this trail, and our team, we operate in 6-man teams, and I could hear voices. I was a point man, as a point man, and almost all of my missions, even when I became team leader, I always walked point because they're the ones that see all the action and firsthand, and you have to make immediate decisions. Sometimes they used to laugh and joke and say, "Oh, put Chief at point because he's got a sixth sense." And I said, "Bull, Chief's got common sense." But anyway, we stopped in a fork in the trail, and we could hear these voices. And right away, Dutch had to take Francis with me, take Scotty with me, and I went to a trail to the right. We started moving this trail, and we moved about 5 meters, 10 meters, and Scotty stepped on a twig. And I turned around and looked back at him. And Rangers, when we walk, you don't talk or anything, just by eye contact. I pointed down at the ground, walk where I walk, step where I step, because there's a lot of punji stakes and tripwires. So as we moved there about another 10 meters again, you could hear the voices much closer, getting closer to us. And he stepped on a twig, a branch. It cracked and made a noise. As I turned around and I looked at him, the enemy opened up on me. All I could see was the whites of his eyes, and he said, "Look out," and I jumped as hard as I could, and they opened up on me with an AK-47. The rounds went through my rucksack and through my fatigues and my jungle fatigues, and as I hit the ground, I opened up, I turned around, and Scotty took 3 rounds from me, 2 in the chest and 1 in the head. He was carrying a M79 vest, and lucky the round didn't hit. It went between his vest went between a couple of the rounds, and I opened up on the enemy. There were 2 of them, NVA soldiers, and I opened up on them. I was in midair. Everyone knows that when you're in combat, everything goes into slow motion. You can almost see the rounds, hear the rounds as they go by you, and I turned around to see Scotty, and his head was laying between 2 bushes, 2 bamboo shoots, and I turned around and I crawled over to him, and his last words were calling my name. As I looked down at him, I thought back to that night back in Fort Lewis, Washington. As he sat there crying and said he wasn't going to come home, he told me his life story. His father beat him every day, trying to make a man out of him. is he lied about his age. He was only 17 years old. He lied about his age to run away from his father. His mother signed his papers for him. That night I was ready to turn him in, and he said, no, I would rather face the enemy than to go home and face my father. That young man, Scotty, died in my arms, being a man, being a warrior. And my message to all the men out there, the fathers, don't abuse your sons. Don't hit your children. Love them, respect them. Today, my travels, I hope never again to have to police up after a father again. Yankiri he.
Wow, Pinigigi, thank you so much, boy. And I really, really appreciate you and all those good words about Barry's dad. And Mary, thank you so much for being on each week. This has just been an honor. My father, the original Bob pilot, was in World War II and in the Korean War. So this goes out to him too. Pinigigi, for all you've done. And Mary, if you got a last word before we leave, and then I'll end the show.
Boy and Barry and Alan, we are so indebted to you that I almost have no words for it. Boy, your story moves me in ways that I never would have imagined. And I want to just say thank you very much. And thank you to the warriors of the past and the warriors that are with us today. And it's important that we hear these stories and that we listen to these stories so that we don't forget. And, just like the others have said, this has been such an incredible learning lesson, and it's such a reminder of humanity and how important it is that we take care of each other and love each other and honor each other and listen to each other's stories, even though it's painful. It brings us right back down to the earth where we all started. So I am in debt to all of you for sharing what you shared today, and I just wish you all health in these next few months as we try to combat this pandemic, a pandemic that is not foreign to our American Indian communities. We lost millions and millions to illnesses over the years, oftentimes intentional genocide. But I would just hope that those that are listening and that share about tonight remember to take care of each other. Remember to wear your mask, wash your hands, stay quarantined, and take care of the vulnerable, because we want to make sure that we're all here for those next 7 generations. And so, thank you for allowing me to be here this evening as well.
Pinigigi for being on each week, Mary and Barry. I'd like you to say a last word before I end the show, please, if you can.
Yeah. Pilama, thanks you, boy, for those words for my dad. I told for my old man there. He was very proud of his service. He ended up in his last few months there at the VA home in Hot Springs, South Dakota. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate your story. And I really hope some young people got to hear that, because that used to be kind of what used to happen. Those stories used to be told like that, so that those memories of those people live on. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with the people. Mary, I'm really proud and grateful to be on here with you. Congratulations for being elected to the Minnesota State Senate. And to my good friend, Robert Pilot, thank you for asking all the service people that were in here, Alan and
Sandy.
everybody, Sandy and everybody that was here, and there's many more. And so just you doing this is good. And maybe when the COVID is over and things get better, we can have a big feast and have a big feed how we should. you know. And so I know I've got corn, and we can have make bread, and maybe somewhere we could do that. You know, I do want to say with my brother Robert and Dick Sheep Boy here, and with Mary, you know, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, I'm really proud of the work that they do. But at some point, we need to invite our Ho-Chunk relatives onto that council, because they have land here in Minnesota and treaty territory, and they have trust land in Houston County, Minnesota, and they have many, many tribal members here in the state of Minnesota, and it's about time that they have a seat at the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. So maybe we can work on that and right a wrong with the Ho-Chunk removal of 1862.
Oh, Peeny. So I'd like to end the show tonight with how I end the show is we need to resist, divest, join a group, or run for office. You've been listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, the Sunday night symposium here on AM 950 and Facebook Live. Peeny for everyone that was on tonight. This was just an unbelievable show. Good night, everybody.
Oh.